Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
All right. Well, Carl is obviously ready for today's show, and I know we are all ready as well. So very excited for today's podcast, bringing back our good friend Carl Smith from the Bureau. So, Carl, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. It's always good to be back, Jamie and Jody, or J and J. That's what we're calling you now.
And as Carl said, Jody's here as well. So welcome, Jody.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to this.
Yeah.
All right, so Carl came to us and said, I really want to be on the podcast again. And it took us about 15 minutes to figure out what episode he wanted to talk about.
I tried to delete the calendar invite, and it was scheduled.
Oh, okay.
It's on you, Jamie.
My bad. Okay, so yeah, we always want Carl on the show because he's entertaining, has great topics, and we said, what's new in the industry right now, Carl? So why don't you talk about what you brought up to us and what you think is one of the trends that you're seeing a lot of right now?
I think one of the big things that's going on specifically for people running shops is they're at a point where they're just kind of exhausted. Everybody's been dealing with trying to get the right talent on the team. Everybody's trying to deal with the increase in work that's coming through and the demands. And a lot of people are starting to put back on their producer gloves. So you saw a lot of agency owners who were like actually in there doing the work, right? They may be in a 30 or 40 person shop, but there's so much work that they find themselves doing that. And then what was interesting was in December at Owner Camp Palm Springs, a lot of people were talking more about the recruiting retention stuff. Like they were still trying to get people in. But then almost 2 months later, when we had the second Owner Camp Palm Springs, people were talking about stepping back. Now, it was different people, but similar types of shops. And there was this shift from I can make this work to almost I've got to get out of here for a little while. And I think a big part of it was they were focused on how do I build a team that can run things so that I can actually take a week or two off. So I think this is the interesting shift that's happening right now. And then also you see a lot of people who are owners that I've had conversations with where they're starting not to recognize their shops because going remote has definitely changed their culture, right? And so I guess if I were to just sum it up, some people are kind of falling out of love with why they started this. So all your clients are going to close shop. Sorry, fellas.
No, that's not good news. It is funny. So I was at that first owners camp in Palm Springs, and there was one individual there when we went around and did the intros. Kind of talked about he'd done exactly what you're talking about. He said, I can't remember how many hours he said he was working a week, but he's like, yeah, I'm not really putting that many hours in a week. I'm pretty relaxed. Things are going really well. The shop's kind of operating on its own, and throughout the week, I felt like I was sitting next to Mick Jagger. Like everybody wanted to talk to this guy. Everybody was sitting next to him. Every meal he had 20 people around him because he had done what a lot of them wanted to do. So even though it wasn't a hot topic at the first owners camp, the fact that he was there and had done it successfully made him just like a celebrity among everybody. Like the amount of questions he got and the amount of times he was referenced throughout the week of, hey, I want to get what he has. I think so. I do think it was a little bit there in that first camp as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. And a lot of that was he had found the right people to put in place to take care of stuff. Right. And I mean, you can look at Rob at Sparkbox. He's done that where he was working like 15-hour weeks or something like that. Every time he says that, the air goes out of the room too. I'm like, read the room, dude. Nobody wants to hear that. But it's funny to me, especially with what you're saying right now, Jamie, that feels like kind of who I was at the early camps. I was the guy who had a different model. I was the guy whose shop was running itself. I was all those kinds of things. And it worked so great until it didn't. And so that's one of those things that'll be curious to see in the long haul, right? Because the other thing, and this has happened more and more, and I think this could be the sucker punch for people who have made that transition from building that team so they can step back, putting on the gloves themselves and doing the work. A lot of people are losing their number twos,
Yeah.
And I've seen this happen over the last, I guess 6 months where somebody thought they had everything stable And the only thing that number two person was waiting on was for things to be okay for them to leave.
Oh wow.
Because
Oh
I've
wow.
spoken to both, I mean, probably a half dozen conversations with either the person who left or the person who, stayed, the owner. And
Hmm.
every time it was almost like, I've been here so long. I didn't want to just take off. I wanted to make sure that everybody was okay. And I wanted a chance to talk to people, but I've got to figure out something for myself. And great resignation, great realization. We're all probably tired of hearing and saying it, but I think that's what a lot of this was, you know? So, and unfortunately, as an owner, we're chained to the damn thing. We
Yes,
can't resign.
it happens at all levels.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, this is definitely a strange time for sure. I mean, we still continue to get just the rank and file are just simply looking for different things to do. I don't want to be an accountant anymore. I want to be a bartender, or it's kind of like it's just a bizarre thing. And with the owners, especially because they're not used to that happening.
Right.
So now, like I said, they're jumping in and solving problems where they wouldn't have to have done that before, just because of the bizarro world that's going on right now. And it's tough. It's for sure tough.
Well, and another thing that I've seen happening, much smaller scale or fewer people, there are people starting to spin up second companies. I don't know if you've seen any of this, but it's like,
Hmm.
I'm going to spin up a maintenance only company. I'm going to spin up a strategy only company. So they're taking one aspect of what they've done, probably the one they like the most or they think they can handle given the talent they have, and spinning it up kind of next to their shop. This to me, I think is kind of fun. Like I had something like this I wanted to do. I never got around to it, but I think there is something where maybe owners identify themselves with the company they created so much, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
Jody, I'm sure that you really identify with Summit. If Summit is having a really bad month, then you probably feel it differently than Jamie, who's just like, no big deal. I'll go somewhere else.
Hmm.
Um, kidding. Am I?
Hey, hey, hey.
Are you recruiting me, Carl? Is that what
So,
you're doing?
so that idea of almost building a second boat,
Hmm.
like, I don't like this boat anymore. I'm going to build a second one and we'll see what happens. I don't think they're doing it that way on purpose. I just think they fell out of love, right? The biggest one to me, though, and this one kind of surprised me because I always felt at Engine we had a great remote culture. But when somebody says, I used to cook lunch for everybody once a month. We would go out and have, coffee, or we would this or we would that, and they've lost that. And you just sense they feel like they've lost a part of themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of like they developed a lifestyle culture and then they grew out of it into more of a corporate culture. Not because they really wanted the lifestyle, but in order to grow, in order to give people bonuses and benefits and keep top employees and everything, you kind of have to grow with it. But in some way, they lost the fun stuff, the stuff that they really enjoyed. They let that kind of stuff just go by the wayside,
Yeah.
um, for profits. And profits are great, and you want to have certain profits, but you want to make sure that you're working within, you keep your culture at the same pace as you grow. Because I really truly think a 10-person shop can have the same culture as a 100-person shop if it's done right and it's grown right. But it's got to be intentional. You can't just take the gloves off and forget about it, because it will change as people are added and subtracted from the team.
Well, especially when, if you look at it, in my view, what I always saw historically was you saw shops grow and you would get to a certain size and you would lose some of your people that had been with you like 10 years, right? And
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
call it old growth. I've talked about this before, but those people would be like, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm going to take off. But the owners are like, this might be an opportunity because that was a person who's been here for a while. We were doing things a certain way because of that individual, or they ran it that way. So maybe we can find a different way to do it. But now when you're losing people that have been with you for a long time, who have been with you an intermediate amount of time and who were there for 2 weeks and then boomeranged back to their old job, it's like now you're getting shot at all over. And so where does culture take root?
Hmm.
It's like the culture is now about replacing. right? And anything that you try to do can feel like forced fun if you're making people do it on Zoom, right? So
Yeah.
there is just a
Mhm.
tremendous amount. It's hard. I think let's just say it's really hard to run a shop
Well,
right now.
I think what makes it hard too is it's not like it's one decision that turns the tide, right? So it's not like you say, okay,
Mm.
when that one person left, that was the changing point. It's a lot of little things. It's a lot of like step by death by a thousand cuts. It's like, okay, 4 years ago we were exactly what I wanted to be. Now we're twice the size, and I don't know half the people in this company, and we're doing product that is, or we're delivering services which isn't exactly what I want to be delivering as 90% of our business instead of 10% of the business like it was 4 years ago. And so, like, again, I've had that talk with owners so many times where I almost feel bad for them because they're like, I just want to go back to where we were 4 years ago. And it's like, well, okay, we can make some steps here, but it's gonna be hard. It's not an easy ended to pull off.
Well, and
Mhm.
I'm going to go back to what you said, Jody, about if you have a 10-person company or 100-person company, it may be the same culture for the owner. They
Mhm.
may feel the same way. They may have the same experiences. It is definitely not for those individuals, though, because that's the other thing that starts, I think, to deteriorate a little bit. You can onboard an employee into a company, but if you don't onboard them into the team, that's a totally different thing. And I remember, especially when Engine was going through fast growth, I've heard about people having it happen right now. It used to be you would see somebody in the hallway you didn't know,
Mhm.
and they had just started, and you might get to talk, but it was just kind of weird that you didn't know. Now you just see a name show up in Slack, and you're like, why is that person? This is a private project. Why is that person here? Like, what? Right? And so I think
They're the vice president.
things change. Right, it could be. But things, because things shift so fast now, I think that really is disruptive. And then the concept of intrinsic, extrinsic, in terms of how you're being taken care of, I think probably people get a little worried about that too. Well, where's all this money coming from that we're hiring all these people, and they told me I had to wait on my raise, you know.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so there's a lot that happens when you suddenly, have all these new faces.
Yeah. Plus, I'm not sure, if the new company, with the way that we've kind of transitioned into the remote world, you've got all these companies that were completely brick and mortar. Really, were kind of 100% against it for the longest time, and then we're kind of forced into it. And now they're trying to embrace it, and they don't know really how yet. They haven't figured it out.
Or they
They
don't.
haven't video chats, and they haven't done your retreats, and all that kind of stuff that you really need to have, because like you had mentioned, the people that pop in every once in a while, you got to actually physically meet them at some point.
Oh
They
yeah,
can't be
people over
out
pixels.
there everywhere.
Absolutely. If you don't meet somebody in person, you have no concept of that human. You don't think about, I don't want to let Jamie down because we had that laugh over a beer when we were in Colorado together, right? Instead,
Exactly.
it's like, I don't know who this guy is. And you shut your laptop and you move along, right?
Hmm.
And the thing is, especially when there's but the word on the street is there's a lot of opportunity for people right now.
Hmm.
So that's the thing. We did the salary survey, and you were there, Jody, in Orlando when we went through it.
Yep.
But developers increase of 32% in their salary from the beginning of the pandemic to now.
Unreal.
Holy crap!
Wow.
Right? I remember. I remember I had somebody I was hiring at one point, and they said, "I just need like 300,000 a year. It's not a bunch, blah blah blah." And I remember looking at them saying, "Will you hire me? I like to make that much." Right? It's just one of those things where you're like people's expectations. So again, back to the kind of thing. I mean, owners unemployable. That's the one thing about the ecosystem that I think keeps shops in play is that owners are not employable, right? Can you imagine, Jody, if you went and tried to work somewhere
No, yeah, it'd be tough. It'd have to be the right situation for sure.
for them? They
Yeah.
would have to be. Jamie knows what I'm saying. It's the same for me. I'd be like, I'd be questioning everything, and occasionally I would cry and crawl under my desk. It's like nobody needs that, right? But that's the other part of it is owners know this is it. I'm curious from your perspective. Have you seen any shops that purposefully just got small and tactical that just said we're not going to try to do this everything for everybody. We're going to shrink a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd say from my personal experience is I've seen a lot more companies talk about it than actually do it, right? So like I've seen a lot of
Hard to
companies
say
come
no
to
to
us
the
and be
work,
like,
right?
yeah, it's hard to say no to the work, and it's hard to say no to the size and the lifestyle and the revenue. You know, it's like, okay, we're a $10 million shop, and yes, we could go back to our roots and just do one thing and be a $4 million shop and have half as many people, but there are people involved and there are projects involved. And it's hard to say no to the work. And so again, I know I've had that conversation a number of times, but probably only really seen people take a step in that direction once or twice. And so I think it's a very hard step to take. I don't know if you agree with that, Jody, but that's what I've seen from my
I
client
think you're right.
discussions.
They talk about it and they vision it, and it's kind of like the dreamland, what it was like when I was single, that type of thing. Now I'm married for 30 years, what it was like way back then. They forget about all the issues they had when they were single. It was like, it wasn't roses back then. It was, it was tough, it was tough to do. You're looking at the next paycheck, all the different issues that you had, when you're single that you don't have right now when you're married. Again, I think it's the same thing,
Yeah.
with those folks that they forget, time heals all wounds, right? And they forget, why they didn't like it when it was back then. They just remember the good stuff,
Well, okay, so there's so much here. I think part of it is when you're running, especially a web shop, you get to that point where there's something that you never thought you'd really be able to manage or take on, and you want it, right? You're like going, oh, I want to say that I worked with Disney or I worked with, right? And so ego kind of gets you into it.
Mhm.
But I had a friend who runs a shop here, a traditional agency, but the thing is over 400 people now. And when I knew him, I was referring work to him, and it was him and about probably 6 people that he worked with. And I saw him a couple of months ago in line at a Dunkin' Donuts, and he's like carrying all these boxes, and he's like, "Carl, what's up?" And I'm like, "Nothing much. What's up with you, fat cat?" And he was like, "Yeah, I gotta be honest." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I mean, I got a lot more stuff, and I might have more money. I'm not really sure, but God, it was nice when it was just 6 of us, and we go have a beer and decide to go home." Like, yeah, but I've seen you on that boat. I've seen you in that lake house. I've seen you in all those things. So you chose, man. You like went
Mhm.
for it. But I think you're right. But I think for some people, like Parliament, right? That's probably an example. Parliament, I don't know
Mhm.
how big they had gotten. They might have been in the teens, but I think they've cut it back to where it's just Chris, and I think they've got maybe 5 people.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah,
Yep.
because are they a client? They're probably a client.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So yeah, and it seems like they're doing great. So
Oh yeah, they will.
yeah, maybe
Yeah, I
you
think
wrap it somehow.
once you make the decision to do it, yeah, I think if you actually go down that road, I do think there is some happiness there, especially if it's about the work, right? Like I think the people that have come to me and said, I'm just tired of working for enterprises. I want to go back to work with startups or whatever either the client base or the type of work. Like if that's the reason you're doing it, then I think you, like you said, you can get satisfied because you catch yourself working in the wrong line of business. Like this isn't what makes me happy. This is what makes my people happy. Let's turn it around and let's do the right kind of work. And I think
Yeah.
that's like you said, Parliament is an example. I think that if you do it for the work, it works out as opposed to just be like trying to Jody's point, trying to be single again. Like that's a harder thing than as opposed to like, okay, I want to go back to my passion.
Just think about all the times you were rejected when you were single. Right? It's like,
No, all time.
why do I think it's going to be better this time around?
Exactly.
I wasn't good at it then. A second date that was worthwhile lasted 2 years minimum. Right? It was like I could not date. I was like a relationship guy.
I was the same way. It was
That way
horrible.
it worked too, though, right? I think we're wired the same, probably in our personal relationships like that and our work relationships, right? Everybody talks
Mhm.
about being married to the business and that kind of crap. Um, but I tell you what, I wake up in the middle of the night more worried about the bureau than I do about my kid, right? Like my kid's
Yeah,
fine.
that's
My
sad,
kid's
isn't
okay.
it?
I can go over there and see my kid. That company thing is out in the ether, right?
Yeah.
It's not like something I can really focus on and just see. And especially for me, because I've got like almost 900 people over there chatting about stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Get in there and see what's going on from time to
And
time.
it could go real wrong quickly.
Yeah, you do have an idea, actually, probably. But
I know exactly.
but no, I think this is really interesting. Falling in love with how things were and not remembering some of those downsides. But the thing was, even with those downsides, I think there was more, we had a sense of control if it was real or not, because
Hmm.
it was smaller and manageable and we could see it all. And then once we get to this point, not only remote, but bigger teams, suddenly we can't see it. And so we tell ourselves stories about what's going
Hmm.
on or dangers that might not exist. And that's when we start talking about, I can't look at it this anymore, and I need to step back and have somebody else come in and look at it. So weird.
Yeah, I think that's the control part of a entrepreneur, right? They want to control the outcome, all the time. I was that way for the longest time, and it takes a long time to really figure out how to give away that control so that the Jamies of the world, can make mistakes and fail and then me not having to have a heart attack because of it, or kill myself because of it in the sarcastic.
Jeez, Jamie.
But,
I
Wow,
want
I
to
better make
call a
you more
suicide
mistakes.
watch on this guy.
yeah, exactly.
No more mistakes for me.
I don't have to kill myself because of the way Jamie does his job. It's pretty much
But
what he said.
it takes a different mindset, right? As for an entrepreneur to give up all that, and the ones that do it really well seem to have no problem with it, like the Rob Hars of the world, where
Yeah.
they give the control up and expect their team to come through with a failure and success both. They're and good with both. That's the key. You have to be good with both, and it's hard for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when it's their baby, to fail.
Well, the big part of it too, I think, is that control aspect, right? Like again, when Jody has me make decisions, I don't make the decisions the same way he would. Like the decisions I make are different than him, but as long as they're in the right direction, then he's fine with it, right? Like if I came in and said, "Yeah, let's not do accounting anymore. Let's become a coffee shop," then he might be like, "Okay, Jamie, you're making a mistake here."
I
But
don't
as
know.
long
I
as
think Jody would totally go for that.
I would have no problem with that.
Fresh ground
yeah,
accounting. I like it.
that's right. But I know I think that's the ultimate goal is like again when you are stepping back is making sure that you trust your people to make the right decisions and you're listening to those decisions and you're not like second guessing every step along the way, right? Like okay, we want to get from point A to point Z. I really have a problem with step C, D, and E. What you should care about is step Z. Like okay, where are you going and is that going to work? And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing that makes success work.
And I think that like we see that a lot with clients, if especially newer clients. As a CFO, we come aboard and they expect us or have the unrealistic expectation that we're perfect, and I wish that you could hire an employee that was ever perfect, but it's the same type of thing. And the expectation is you have to have that trust, and you got to build that trust pretty quickly with an employee. You've got it over time. With somebody new, you don't have as much time to develop that trust, but you got to develop that trust in order for them to know that, hey, yeah, they're going to make mistakes also, just like you've made mistakes all your life, that type of thing. They're not perfect, but it kind of gives you that ability to eventually give it up. Hey, let them take over that marketing department or finance department or whatever department that might be, and run it with just little oversight. And I think that's the key. I think to getting through all that, right? I mean, that's how Rob does it. And, that's how I do it. You just simply have to give up control. But again, believe in your people and believe that they're going to be, they're going to do the right thing.
Right. But over time, I
Right.
think
Yeah.
that's the part that people miss.
Yep.
They feel like, oh, you know what, next week I'm going to do that.
Right.
It's going to take years.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, maybe months, but to me, it feels like, especially because what you said, Jamie, right? Owners have always done it a certain way, and we always think that's the way to do it. And there are other things we tried that didn't work, and so we convinced those things will never work. But the reality is, we couldn't make it work. That
Right.
doesn't mean
Right.
somebody else can't.
Great
And we failed when we took off in this direction. That doesn't mean somebody else will. Right. And
Right.
we've had decades in some of our cases doing this stuff and building up an understanding of what works and doesn't work for us. So the idea that you tell somebody exactly how to do something, like you e-myth it, right? Like you make it so that you're just making the burgers. It doesn't work in this industry. People have to have an understanding. And if they don't feel like they're getting to make that decision and they're getting to fail, then they're going to blame you every time because they are not going to be invested in it because you told them this is exactly how to do it. I think this is really big. It's owners want to step back, but I think they're also really afraid of somebody else seeing the hot mess
Right.
is how they run it.
Yeah, we're all in that
Well,
imposter.
I'm going to
Yeah.
clean up the house before the cleaning crew gets here. I
Yeah.
don't want them to see that stain on the table. No, you hired them to come in and take care of the stain on the table because you're so busy at work, right? Or whatever it might be. But I think it's the same when we try to bring in somebody. I just need about a week. I'm just going to clean up a few things. No, let them see the mess so they can understand where it came from, right?
Well, also, I think letting them see the mess, make sure you have the right person too, right? Like, a lot of people, I know it's from the hiring I've done, like I've done that before. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to take a couple more weeks on this client and get it cleaned up before I hand it off to this CFO that's taking it over. But then I'm like, let's just, they can figure this out. They're a smart person, but then, you can kind of find out that person's fit for the job as well because they're like, nope, this is too much of a mess. This is not what I want to touch. Or they dig in and they challenge, they really figure it out. And that's the type of people you want anyways, at least from my experience.
No, oh man. I'm so glad I don't run a shop anymore, fellas. This would be a horrible time to be running a shop. I'm so glad I just get to help people running them now. I I can't help but think there are a lot of owners out there who would just cut and run if they could. You see a lot more, but not as many mergers right now as people looking at acquisitions. Big C had that big announcement the other day where they've acquired the largest shop that was in their origin city in St. Pete, Tampa. I know a lot of people have come to me. Dusty's looking at e-resources, and I see a lot of people who are just starting to look at acquisition as a way. I guess if everything's already in such a tumultuous state, like why not just merge some things together and see
Right.
what happens? Because at least we'll have enough people to do the work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a challenging time, and I think that, like we said, I think we've focused, at least on this podcast, at least on our internal conversations, we focused on the lower levels. We focused on the employees and the Great Resignation and everything like that. But I think this podcast was kind of a step back at the owners, the ones that are dealing with a lot of that. So I think that was really effective and a good conversation here. But I'm going to throw it over to both you guys for one final thought and tip for people that might be feeling this way. Let's turn it on that. So Carl, if you had to talk to one person, you're having that conversation with them, what tip would you give to someone that's feeling like they need to step back?
What I would say is you really need, and this sounds like something that so many people talk about, but you really need to North Star it. Like, don't just say, I want to step back from this, but figure out what you want to step towards, right? It's not enough to get something out of your life. You have to put something else in it, or else you're just going to run back. So what is it you want to do next week instead? Or how can you make tomorrow better by just like spending a little bit of time at the end of today saying these 3 things feel valuable to me, right? Give yourself little wins and celebrate them. But ultimately, make sure you know where you're going to, not just what you're running from.
Great. That's a great tip.
I second that 100%. I mean, yeah, you said it really well. I mean, we always tell people that, if you never have that direction or that target you're going for, you're always going to go sideways. You're going to go this way all the time. But once you set the goal that, hey, I want to buy that car and here's what I've got to do to get it. I want to buy a house. Here's what I've got to do to get it. Or I want to be a $10 million firm or a $5 million firm or whatever that is. Once you actually set that goal and then you've developed that roadmap to get to that goal, people just, tend to go that way. And so if your goal is to downsize, and you want to do that, well, don't just do it tomorrow. Figure out what your goal is and how you can do that strategically to get to where that is. If you want to go sideways and flounder all the way, don't set goals. That's pretty easy to do. Most people do it that. But if you want to set, goals in which you want to eventually exit the company, like you'd mentioned, set that goal. But I would even set it further than that. So if you want to exit the company, what do you do afterwards? What's that true drive? It can't just be exiting, because once you quit the company or you get out of the company, then what are you going to do? You're going to do it again? You're going to start another company? What's your goal there? And so, if that goal is, hey, I want to open a flower shop and I want to, do something like that. Well, then how am I going to get there in the current company I'm at? What pace do I need to get there? At what point will I be able to sell it? And then at that point, then how am I going to get that, or how to use those funds to open this flower shop, or whatever that second goal might be. And I think that's the key there, because often you get to the point where it's like, okay, so I've done everything. I'm 50 years old. Okay, it's time to sell, and goodbye. I'm going to have, a couple $1 million in the bank. I'm happy. You're not going to be happy because you're going to be looking for that next thing to do, and I can't even imagine the depression you'd feel once you've done that. You've succeeded at everything. It's got to feel, there's got to be that depression, that vacuum that you have. So I think setting that secondary goal is really important.
And I think back to all of that too, I think the other part is as the owner, you do have flexibility in the decisions you make as well as what you do. Again, I think every owner feels like they need to be CEO. Like ultimately, this might be a little crazy to say, but like as the owner, you don't need to be the CEO. You can hire a CEO, you can hire a president, and you could be a PM, or you could be something that, okay, this is what I really love doing. This is what I've done this for 35 years now. I know this is the role I was most happy in. I'm going to do that role. I'm going to be sales, and then I'm going to let someone else be the CEO. Again, I'll be part of those decisions and listen to what the decisions are making, but you don't have to be the decision maker if it's not what makes you happy ultimately.
Yeah. Here.
Great.
If I could, can I end us with one thing that Garrett Oliver, the brewmaster at Brooklyn Brewery, I was lucky enough to see him speak. And he said to this room full of entrepreneurial people, anybody can be a millionaire. There's just that thing you won't do. And I feel like that thing that some of us won't do is what we need to hold on to. That is a core value, right? Like there's something, we won't hurt somebody else, or we won't do something like that. So I think, Jody, I love your idea of that secondary goal or that extended out goal, and making sure that you're not setting yourself up to go against something that's a core value. Like so many of us are always looking social media where we compare our insides to other people's outsides and wanting to get there. But would we really want to take that trip? So, yeah.
Right. Well said.
Great way to end this podcast. Appreciate both you guys. And as always, Carl, was fun. And we'll let you get on here again, I guess, if you want to sometime.
I'll try to cancel that calendar invite. Every time I try to cancel it, it just kicks it out.
It gets resent.
All right, fellas. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.